Hey guys, tonight we're rummaging through the bathroom drawers of Victorian gentlemen, metaphorically of course. You're surrounded by mahogany cabinets, the flickering scent of beeswax polish, and somewhere off to your right, a valet humming God Save the Queen as he lays out your cravat. The air smells like coal smoke, lavender, and something vaguely animal. That's just your cologne. You don't question it. You are a Victorian man. You are deeply committed to looking respectably, and that begins with soap. But this is not the gentle almond-scented bar in your shower today. No. The soap you lift each morning from its porcelain dish is about the size and hardness of a cobblestone. It's dark brown, nearly black, and slick with a film that leaves an oily sheen on your fingers. It's called manly tar soap, and it smells exactly as it sounds, like scorched pine, chinny flues, and mild desperation. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget to drop your location and the local time in the comments. You love knowing where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You scrub your face with the tar soap, the scent biting like the winter wind off the Thames. It's supposed to be invigorating. Instead, it feels like exfoliating with sand and regret. The label printed in a florid copper plate boasts that it contains essential extracts of Norway pine, raw pitch, and sulfur. Excellent. You smell like a haunted lumber mill. Tar-based soaps were all the rage for rugged cleansing, a phrase that should honestly come with a trigger warning. Doctors of the day claimed tar had medicinal properties, good for the skin, for soothing manly ailments like itch, boils, and invisible parasites. Historians still argue whether these claims were based on actual clinical evidence or just wishful 19th century thinking. Either way, it gave soap an air of authority and, in some cases, the texture of roof sealant. More luxurious options were available, of course, especially if you were a gentleman of means. Here's transparent soap. Introduced in the late 18th century but wildly popular among Victorian elites, boasted clarity and a refined scent, something between flowers and formaldehyde. It was translucent, like hard candy, and just as terrifying if you accidentally licked it. Still, here's was a status symbol. You didn't just wash with it, you displayed it. Some households even left unused bars in guest basins like a sign of prestige. You know, in case anyone questioned your hygiene by sniffing your lavatory. But many men preferred soaps that announced their presence. Coal tar variants, carbolic soaps, and even those mixed with dried oxgalias, that spile were advertised as strong, masculine choices. The more it stung, the better you must be doing, right? Because nothing screams virility like minor skin irritation. In your morning routine, washing wasn't just about cleanliness. It was also a declaration. I may have walked past an open sewer and a cholera ward, but my cheeks are raw and my pores are blistered. And by God, I am civilized. Water quality, of course, was a whole other nightmare. If you were lucky enough to live in a grand London townhouse, your water might come from a cistern on the roof filled via rain with a local waterworks, which were still figuring out the don't mix it with sewage part. Hence the soap. A kind of protective talisman against the invisible horrors swirling in your morning splash bowl. Did it work? Well, no one's sure. But you smelled aggressively medicinal, and that counted for something. Let's not forget that soap was also a class marker. A gentleman didn't reek of sweat and labor. He reeked, ideally, of antiseptic pine, hinting that he had no need to work for his living, only to attend cabinet meetings, sit port, and perhaps faint elegantly at the opera. Here still was the brief rise of electrical soap, which claimed to be magnetized. You'd run it across your skin to align your inner forces and draw out impurities. Historians still argue whether anyone truly believed in this magnetic cleansing or if it was just a particularly British brand of sarcasm. Either way, you're pretty sure it just gave you static shocks. And so, as you sit back now in your dressing robe, your skin raw, your nostrils smoldering with the heady scent of ironwood and bad decisions, you consider that perhaps this is as clean as a man can reasonably get in an age when deodorant was optional and toothbrushes were optional. You glance at your soap dish. It's empty. You sniff your fingers. It still smell like chimney. Tomorrow, you tell yourself, you'll try the one labeled bracing lime instead. Though based on experience, it'll probably smell like turpentine and citrus despair. You settle into your chair by the fire, towel draped across your shoulders, and reach for your morning tea. It's Earl Grey, naturally, infused with bergamot and boiled within an inch of its life. But something odd happens as you raise the cup. You bump your mustache on something porcelain. Yes, you remember now. Your mustache cup. A curious invention of the mid-19th century, the mustache cup is the Victorian gentleman's secret weapon against soggy facial hair. Fashioned with a discreet porcelain ledge under the rim complete with a neat half-moon opening, it allows you to sip your drink while shielding your proud upper lip from the horror of tea-stained whiskers. It's both elegant and, frankly, ridiculous. You position your mouth just so, sip through the opening, and feel like a knight navigating adjusting mass. Your mustache remains dry. Your dignity, however, took a small hit. Victorians adored mustaches. They weren't just trendy, they were practically mandatory. In fact, in some British military regiments, mustaches were part of the official dress code. A bare upper lip was seen as untrustworthy, possibly French. And we can't have that. Thus, mustache protection became an entire niche market. Aside from the mustache cup often decorated with roses, hunting scenes, or dramatic stags, there were waxes, brushes, and even tiny curlers. You might apply a beeswax concoction in the morning and twist each side to a delicate upward spiral that would terrify modern baristas. But the mustache cup was particularly beloved among tea drinkers. It spared men from that most unmanly experience, the damp, dribbling whisker. You didn't grow this majestic caterpillar to have it droop like wet laundry. The trend caught on so thoroughly that manufacturers scrambled to produce variations, some with gold rims, others with personalized monograms. You could even commission one with a painted portrait of your hunting dog. Nothing says refinement like sipping over a spaniel. Historians still debate who exactly invented the mustache cup. Some say it was an English potter named Harvey Adams around 1860. Others argue it was an Austrian design. One fringe theory insists it was a French satire that the English mistakenly took seriously. That actually sounds plausible. What is certain is that these cups became ubiquitous in middle and upper class households across Europe. They were proudly displayed in parlors, gifted at weddings, and passed down through generations like precious heirlooms. Imagine explaining to your grandson, this cup belonged to your great-great-grandfather. It kept his mustache dry while he sipped claret and judged poetry. You glance around your morning room. There's a silver shaving basin on the vanity, a lace antimacassar on the armchair because your hair oils are invasive in now, this cup with a porcelain bridge for your lip bush. You're starting to realize that Victorian masculinity was an elaborate, high-maintenance illusion built entirely on accessories. And yet, there's comfort in ritual. The warmth of the tea, the slight awkwardness of maneuvering your mouth just right, it's like threading a very proud needle. You begin to enjoy the absurdity. Still, the mustache cup wasn't without controversy. In more conservative circles, it was seen as fuss too precious, too theatrical. There were whispers that men who used them might also be the sort to wear cologne. Fragrant, suspicious cologne. We'll get to that soon. But for now, you twirl your mustache contemplatively. It gleams faintly with last night's wax. The shape has held impressive, considering the humidity. You've even trained one side to curl slightly tighter, so your profile looks more poetic. Of course, if you're on the go, sipping tea from a mustache cup becomes problematic. Public houses rarely offer them. And God forbid you drink beer from a tankard, the foam alone could deconstruct months of grooming. Some gentlemen solved this by tilting their heads sideways to drink, like birds at a fountain. Others just accepted the cost and carried tiny handkerchiefs for mustache dabbing. They were sold in sets, embroidered, because of course they were. You reach for the newspaper. It's filled with updates on the Suez Canal, scandals involving minor nobility, and a new brand of mustache wax called Imperial Grip. Promises to hold your style through storm, scandal, and fainting spells. You make a mental note. You glance again at your cup. The porcelain is warm now. The design shows a fox hunt in pale blue, men on horses leaping over hedges. None of them have mustache cups, but you know better. They probably had a footman following with one. Outside, your valet calls for the boot black. Another day awaits. You wipe the rim of your cup, fold your towel neatly, and stand. Your mustache, perfect. Your tea, still hot. Your sense of purpose, slightly confused, but undeniably sophisticated. Your valet has just finished brushing a microscopic speck of lint from your overcoat because nothing ruins a gentleman's image like a raw bit of fluff, and now you step toward the dresser for the next critical phase of your toilet, dental care. Or, as the Victorians might have called it, oral management through powdered mystery. There is no toothpaste here. No squeezable tube. No sweet fluoride foam. Instead, you reach for a small ceramic pot labeled Dr. Newbold's dentifrice powder, which sounds reassuringly official, like it might contain something vaguely antiseptic or possibly powdered horse bone. You unscrew the lid and gaze down at the contents. It's a fine gray powder, clumping slightly from the morning humidity. You waft a little toward your nose, yes, a fragrant bouquet of burnt charcoal, mint oil, and just a whisper of chalkboard. To use it, you dip your dry toothbrush more like a hedgehog on a stick into the pot, tapping off the excess like a chef dusting flour. Then, with great ceremony, you begin scrubbing. The taste, startling. Imagine licking a fireplace after someone dropped a peppermint in it. Tooth powders in the Victorian era were a wildly creative science. Common ingredients included powdered charcoal for whitening, chalk for abrasion, salt for purification, and orris root for that faintly floral aftertaste that made you question your life choices. If you were very unlucky, your powder might include crushed brick or cuttlefish bone. Historians still argue whether these concoctions actually cleaned teeth or simply eroded them faster and more evenly. Of course, if you had money, and you do, obviously you might splurge on a French import. These came in delicate tins and promised results like pearlescent clarity and aromatic breath. They also cost more than your valet earns in a week. But hey, he doesn't need pearlescent clarity. He's not attending Parliament. There were fringe options, too. Some gentlemen swore by lemon juice. Others dabbled in ammonia rinses, or rubbed their gums with dry sage leaves to stimulate the moral fibers. We're not sure what that means either, but it sounds impressive. Still, for all the enthusiasm, the Victorian approach to oral hygiene was patchy at best. Toothbrushes were often made with boar bristles, which frayed quickly and tended to harbor entire civilizations of bacteria. Your brush, you'll note, smells faintly of old toast and something fungal. Charming. You pause. Spit discreetly into your chamber basin. There's a soft hiss as the powder reacts with your morning breath. You contemplate a rinse but recall that mouthwash, as it existed, was often just diluted brandy or, if you're particularly unlucky, a copper sulfate solution marketed as invigorating rinse water. Instead, you opt for the house remedy, a quick swish of warm salted water. Tastes like regret, but doesn't burn holes in your cheeks. Progress. A fringe dental enthusiast might own a tongue scraper, often made from silver or tortoise shell. You have one, of course 8 came in your travel set, but it looks more like a tiny medieval torture device than a hygiene tool. You run it once along your tongue, and immediately regret your curiosity. Still, your mouth feels cleaner. Numb. Possibly both. Now, let's not forget the whitening options. You could try pumice stone mixed with vinegar, a technique borrowed from ancient Rome, or burnt bread crusts mashed into paste. But the most elite solution, a compound called Dr. Theobald's whitewash, a fine powder that, legend says, turned a gentleman's teeth so white, it blinded suitors across the dance floor. Historians still debate whether it whitened or simply stripped enamel down to its ghost. But you'll stick with charcoal. It's gritty, it's awful, and it makes you feel like you've just chewed through a fireplace log, but it gets the job done. You smile at yourself in the mirror. Your teeth slightly gray in the candlelight gleam with a matte finish. A passing trend. Glossy teeth, after all, are suspicious. Like you're trying too hard. You blot your lips with a corner of your towel and marvel at how much effort goes into not smelling like a Victorian alley. Your breath, while not minty in the modern sense, now carries the unmistakable scent of possibly tolerable. And that, my dear chap, is as good as it gets in 1874. Now that your mustache is dry and your teeth faintly echo the taste of last night's fireplace, it's time for that final flourish cologne. Or, as it might better be described, weaponized fragrance. You unstopper a thick glass bottle labeled Bay Rum Tonic, and immediately your nose twitches. It smells like cloves and navel discipline. This, supposedly, is what rugged adventure smells like, a blend of West Indian bay leaves, rum, and the faint ghost of someone yelling at sailors. You dab some onto a square of linen and pat your neck. It burns. Naturally. Bay rum was wildly popular among Victorian gentlemen. It originated in the Caribbean, where locals steeped bay leaves in rum and sometimes added citrus or cinnamon bark. When British colonials caught wind of it, they declared it exotically masculine and brought it home in bulk, no doubt while coughing into their handkerchiefs. But this is just one of many scents on offer. You peer into your cologne cabinet, it's less a vanity than a small apothecary. There's lavender musk, vinegar of the Four Thieves, civet essence, and a curious vial labeled Hungary water that smells like regret steeped in rosemary. Some of these are said to attract ladies, others might repel small animals. Historians still debate whether Victorian colognes were primarily olfactory experiences or just preventative medicine in disguise. Because here's the dirty little secret, many of these toiletries doubled as disinfectants. Hospitals used carbolic acid solutions to sanitize wounds and, conveniently, men used similar formulas on their armpits and necks. You know, just in case the miasma strikes again. You take a cautious whiff of Macassar cologne for the vigorous. Man, it smells like turpentine, funeral lilies, and possibly pepper. You set it down slowly. The line between hygiene and pest control was razor thin. One cologne, called Dr. Blenkinsop's Invigorating Essence, proudly advertised that it could revive a fainting gentleman or stun an ill-tempered was. You assume this was based on field testing. Then there was Florida water, a citrus and spice blend used for everything from aftershave to air freshener to spiritual cleansing. Some even bathed in it. And by bathed, we mean poured a few drops into the bathtub and hoped to drown out the smell of your ancestors. You settle on a safer choice, 4,711 UD cologne, imported from Germany. It has a light citrus note and only minor undertones of expired clove cigarettes. It's considered refined used by diplomats, artists, and the occasional baron with eczema. The trick to applying cologne in Victorian times was moderation. A true gentleman didn't read. He merely exuded an aura whisper of fragrance designed to mask the industrial horror that was most city air. You dab a bit behind each ear, along your collarbone, and onto your wrist pulse points, because someone once told you that's where the scent blooms. You've never verified it, but it sounds elegant. You consider the newer Spraysa ones with squeeze bulbs and little rubber nozzles, but they always startle you. Besides, spritzing is for French perfumeries and theatrical ladies. A gentleman pats. And if the bottle shatters, well, that's just the price of dignity. Of course, not everyone agrees. Some traditionalists believe men shouldn't wear scent at all. A real man, they argue, should smell like pipe tobacco, horses, and stern resolve. But these are also the same men who believe bathing is seasonal. You'll stick with clubs, thank you very much. Quirky as it may seem, Culloden had a strange political weight. Wearing a French scent might mark you as cosmopolitan or a sympathizer. A German blend might show modernity, or mild Prussian ambition. An English lavender tonic, safely patriotic. Historians still argue whether scent choices influenced courtships or cabinet appointments. Frankly, it wouldn't surprise you. You cap the bottle and slide it back into your velvet-lined tray. A faint fog of citrus and spice now hovers about you like a polite but determined ghost. You feel fresher, poised, slightly flammable. As you don your waistcoat, you take a final deep breath. The layers of soap, charcoal, mustache wax, then cologne emerge into something strangely comforting, like a drawing room doused in antiseptic. You are ready to face the day, assuming you don't faint from your own fragrance. You stride back toward the mirror with purpose now. Your mustache is waxed to perfection, your teeth grit scrubbed into Victorian glory, and your neck smells faintly of herbal anesthesia. But there's one more step, a critical one. Your hair. Ah, the Victorian gentleman's hair. A statement piece. A bird's nest of ambition. You lean forward, inspecting the silhouette of your parting, which currently resembles a small landslide. Time to reach for your secret weapon, Macassar oil. You unscrew the ornate cap of a heavy glass bottle. Inside is a thick, amber fluid that looks suspiciously like machine lubricant and smells like a haunted apothecary. That's the signature scent of Macassar, a potent blend of coconut oil, palm oil, and ylang-ylang with occasional bonus notes like bergamot, rosemary, or clove. Or turpentine, if you bought the off-brand version. You pour a small puddle into your palm. Already your fingers begin to glisten and slowly, reverently, apply it to your hair. The effect is immediate. Strands darken, flatten, and glisten like lacquered furniture in a cigar lounge. You part your hair with a tiny ivory comb, carefully smoothing the strands until your head resembles the top of a well-polished Grand Pinot. Macassar oil wasn't just a fashion staple, it was a social hazard. Furniture everywhere bore the consequences. High-backed chairs developed anti-Macassar stoves, little lacy doilies on the headrests, not for decoration, but as shields against the onslaught of oil-streaked hair. Without them, your parlor looked like someone had been buttering heads and rubbing them on the upholstery. Historians still debate whether antimacassars were genuine interior design innovation or just passive-aggressive notes from exhausted housekeepers. Either way, they spread fast. But you don't worry about that. Your home is well defended. You even carry a personal chair cloth for public sitting tucked discreetly in your inner coat pocket. True story. Some gentlemen did. The oil serves another purpose, too. It holds your style in place during long rides in open carriages, stiff breezes along the Thames, or sudden fainting spells caused by tight cravats. It's both glue and gloss, form and function, and possibly flammable. You make a mental note not to stand too close to the fireplace. And if Macassar isn't your preference, you've got options. There's Bear Grease Pomade, if you enjoy smelling like a circus tent, or perhaps Rowland's Kaleidoor, an early hair tonic that promised to restore vitality and repel critics. Then there's the truly bizarre. One gentleman in 1859 wrote to the Lancet praising a mixture of linolene and gin as a revitalizing scalp rinse. Historians still argue whether he was serious or just drawn. Still, grooming was no laughing matter. Hair implied discipline. A disheveled gentleman might be mistaken for an anarchist, a poet, or worse, a foreigner. Every strand had to be in place, gleaming with the silent authority of someone who owns cufflinks and an opinion on bridge design. You take a step back and admire the result. Your sideburns are symmetrical, your part so clean it could be used for small naval battles, and the overall shape of your coiffure now reads minor viscount with strong opinions on land tax. Satisfied, you clean your hands with a scrap of lion soaked in vinegar. Modern soap just doesn't cut through Macassar. The cloth is instantly ruined, and you make a mental note to tip your valet. You glance at your hat. A topper, of course. Lined in silk, it must accommodate your now glossy dome without smearing or slippage. That's why you'll don it last, just before leaving. For now, you revel in the final touches. You smooth down the edges, fan a little cool air across your scalp, and watch as the oil sets into a semi-permanent shield. Like lacquer for the soul. Hair, after all, is the crown you never remove unless you're losing it. In which case, there are dozens of tonics for that. Most of them smell like garlic and failure. But for now, you are radiant. Ready. Heroic in the dim light of your dressing room, with just the right amount of oil glinting on your brow. A walking candle hazard. A shining beacon of Victorian masculinity. You turn toward the door, where your valet waits, holding your gloves, and mercifully not standing too close to the antimacassar. Your gloves are soft, your collar is starched within an inch of its life, and you've adjusted your cuffs precisely 3 times. Everything about your ensemble says I am a man of letters and leisure. But you're not quite done. You reach into the small drawer by your dressing table and pull out something exquisite, your beard comb. It's barely the size of a matchbook, carved from tortoiseshell or possibly ivory, though you tell guests it's fox, for the sake of polite society, and its teeth are so fine they look like they could play harpsichord. This little object may seem delicate, even whimsical, but in the hands of a Victorian gentleman, it is an instrument of pride. You take a seat again, lean slightly forward, and begin to comb. Slowly, reverently, starting from the chin, upward through the beard, gently fanning the tips outward like a blooming flower of self-importance. Then down the sides, sculpting your sideburns into matching crescent moons. It's a meditative act, a ritual, one that might be repeated 5 or 6 times throughout the day, depending on humidity, scandal, and your proximity to a lady of interest. Historians still argue whether Victorian men genuinely needed to groom their beards this often, or if it simply gave them something to do while ignoring uncomfortable political conversations. Either way, the beard comb became a status symbol, a token of fastidious masculinity. You had one, and you kept it close. Some men carried them in waistcoat pockets, right next to their fob watches. Others had combs built into their walking sticks, with a secret panel that snapped open like a spy gadget. You've considered it, but it feels a touch flamboyant, even for you. Beard grooming kits were sold in lavish sets, often as gifts from one gentleman to another. Yours came in a velvet-lined leather pouch, alongside a pair of trimming shears and a vial of beard tonic made from almond oil, vinegar, and soap. The bottle claims it stimulates virility and calms anarchist tendencies. That's quite a range. But beard care wasn't just about vanity. It was a philosophical stance. Facial hair in Victorian times had political undertones. A full beard suggested wisdom, stability, and possibly deep opinions about colonial taxation. A goatee, slightly suspicious. A clean-shaven chin, suitable only for priests, actors, or bank tellers. And you wear the classic mutton chop meets well-tended groove arrangement, which signals both confidence and a vague sense of forestry. Of course, grooming had hazards. Beard lice were real. Beard dandruff, called face snow in less delicate circles, was the scourge of the winter season. You combat this with a daily brushing, occasional applications of rosewater, and a quiet prayer to Saint Bristles, the imaginary patron saint of facial grooming. You pause your combing and inspect your handiwork in the mirror. Every hair aligns like troops in parade formation. You are not just groomed, you are curated. Quirky as it sounds, the beard comb also had social uses. At salons and tea rooms, a man might pull his comb from his pocket and casually run it through his beard while pontificating about rail investments or the merits of Swinburne. It was a way of saying, I am thoughtful, stylish, and mildly terrifying. You've even seen combs used in duels not as weapons, but as provocations. A man who groomed mid-argument was clearly signaling, I look better than you, even while insulting your mother. Bold stuff. And the most flamboyant. Carved mother-of-pearl combs inscribed with monograms or mottos like steady thee chin or trim thee temper. These were the beard equivalent of a pocket watch with a skull on it. You slide your comb back into its pouch, give your beard a final pat, and glance once more into the mirror. It gleams. It radiates Victorian logic, masculine decorum, and just a whisper of beard tonic. You're ready now. Your face is a topiary of intent. You stand. Your valet offers your hat. You hesitate, then tuck the beard comb discreetly into your coat pocket. Just in case. Because who knows what the day might throw at you, a stiff breeze, a scandal, or heaven forbid, an unexpected portrait sitting. You've combed your beard, slicked your hair, and your scent could disorient small mammals at 5 paces. But beneath all the pomp and polish lies a universal truth. You sweat. And unlike the modern man, you have no roll-on, no spray, and certainly no clinical strength aluminum zirconium miracle to fall back on. You do however have baking soda. You glance down at a small ceramic pot labeled alum compound for underarm application. Inside is a crumbly white powder with the texture of fine sand and the hopeful scent of nothing. Which is good. Because the goal isn't to smell like roses, it's to not smell like roast lamb left in the sun. You dip a lion puff into the pot and gently pat the powder under your arms, watching. A thin cloud rise into the air like a ghostly puff of shame. It tickles a little. It will soon cake. That's how you know it's working. Victorian gentlemen didn't have deodorant, not as we know it. What they had were natural absorbents, alum, talc, baking soda, and, for the daring, boric acid. These were applied not just to the underarms, but to the feet, the neck, and sometimes the inside of one's gloves. You once knew a fellow who applied vinegar and baking soda simultaneously for maximum freshness. He also once lit his cravat on fire. Historians still argue whether these routines were based on science or a deeply British tendency to suffer politely. There were also aromatic sachets, Small cloth pouches stuffed with lavender, cloves, or camphor that could be tucked under the arms or into waistcoat pockets. Some gentlemen sewed them into their labels. You tried that once until a dinner guest leaned in too close and sneezed into your chest. Body odor was the enemy, but strangely, not always acknowledged. Polite society ignored it like a fainting ant. You didn't talk about it. You just powdered and prayed. You reach for a second container. This one labeled powder de Marchal, a blend of orris root, crushed rose petals, and starch. You dust it across your chest and neck, hoping it sticks better than last time, when it rained and you left behind a streaky pink trail through the conservatory. Victorian sweat management was about absorption and disguise, not elimination. The idea of blocking sweat entirely hadn't caught on. Sweating, after all, was considered healthy. It showed that one was active, vigorous, and perhaps emotionally repressed. Just not incompetent. There were fringe solutions, of course. One particularly aggressive product involved rubbing one's armpits with lemon juice and salt, simultaneously exfoliating and emotionally scaring. Another, Dr. Powell's antiperspirant liniment, promised dryness for days and a bonus side effect of mildly paralyzing the surrounding skin. You pass on that one. Still, the scent battle was ongoing. You shift slightly in your chair. The baking soda begins to do its work, mingling with the bay rum on your neck and the macassar oil in your hair. The combined effect, bold, unapologetic, slightly confusing. But hey, it's 1881. You've survived worse. For those who truly feared public embarrassment, there were dress shield, small pads of flannel or wool sewn into the underarm of a shirt to soak up sweat before it could reach the outer layers. You've got two in place today. Reusable, washable, dubious. And then there was the ultimate fallback, layering. 3 undershirts, a waistcoat, and a coat could hide even the most aggressive moisture betrayal. Of course, it also meant slow cooking yourself like a Victorian roast. You fainted once in July. No one spoke of it again. You stand up, flex your shoulders. There's a light dusting of powder along your collar. You brush it away casually, as if dandruff were a seasonal accessory. And just like that, your underarms are reasonably dry, your feet are dusted, and your body is locked into a complex blend of tonics, talcs, and denial. You may not smell fresh in the modern sense, but you smell intentional. Like a gentleman who has read a manual, followed every step, and simply refuses to acknowledge that biology is winning. You're powdered, puffed, and ready. Just don't raise your arms too high during conversation. Or at all. Really, best to keep your elbows politely bent, just like your opinions. You're upright now, powdered into submission, with your coat buttoned, and your beard shimmering like a walnut des. But before you slip your gloves on and declare yourself done, there's one last detail to fineness: your fingernails. You reach for your nail buffing kit, a small velvet pouch tied with a cord, tucked neatly beside your pocket watch. Inside, tools worthy of a jeweler, a curved bone scraper, a cuticle stick tipped in ivory, a tiny brush with boar bristles, and the piece de resistance, your buffing pad. It looks like a plush domino and feels like stroking a very small, very judgmental cat. The outer layer is chamois leather, buttery soft, and wrapped around a firm padded core filled with something mysterious, possibly sand, or pure class resentment. You hold it like a precious stone, and begin the buffing ritual. Back and forth, gentle but purposeful. You're not polishing to a high shine that would be improper. This is a matte finish, the sign of a respectable man. Glossy nails are theatrical, vulgar, continental. No, a gentleman's hand should be clean, soft, and faintly glowing like moonlight through fog. You buff each nail with careful attention, rotating your hand like a sculptor inspecting his latest marble masterpiece. Buffing takes time. Buffing takes conviction. After all, it's not about impressing others, it's about proving to yourself that even your keratin is above reproach. In the Victorian world, hands were evidence. Rough, dirty hands signaled labor. Pellused palms meant trade, toil, or heaven forbid manual work. Smooth, tended fingers spoke of libraries, letters, and lounging. Hands were social passports. You kept them presentable. The nail care products of the era weren't primitive. Some were downright extravagant. You once saw a buffing set inlaid with mother of pearl, complete with tiny scissors shaped like swans. Another featured nail polish paste made from a proprietary mix of carmine, beeswax, and crushed pearl. Historians still debate whether that paste enhanced nail health or simply gave Victorian men an excuse to carry around makeup without admitting it. You continue buffing. There's a quiet, satisfying resistance as the leather pad glides across your thumbnail. A faint warmth builds. It's almost meditative, this small, absurd war against entropy. There were also commercial nail care services in some cities. Gentlemen's clubs sometimes offered manicure by appointment, where attendants always discreet would trim, file, and buff your digits while you sipped brandy and discussed railroad bonds. You've never indulged. Yet. Of course there were extremes. Some foppish sorts took to painting their nails with clear varnish, a trend imported from the French court and whispered about in scandalous circles. Others dyed their cuticles pink to appear more youthful. One notorious poet allegedly gilded his fingernails in leaf gold for a masquerade ball. He was later banned from 4 drawing rooms and knighted anyway. Society is inconsistent. But you are not that man. You are reasonable. You are monist. You are committed to subtle perfection. You pause to admire your work. Your nails are smooth, even, and reflect the gaslight in soft, gentlemanly glints. No dirt under the tips. No snags. No threatening gleam. Just clean competence. You consider applying a light dab of cuticle cream almond scented, absurdly expensive, gifted to you by a distant cousin who writes etiquette manuals. You rub it gently around each nail bed. It leaves a faint sheen, a scent of pastry, and a vague sense of moral superiority. You flex your fingers experimentally. The joints crack slightly. You imagine yourself holding a glass of sherry, gesturing with the kind of casual elegance that says, I know exactly how much my watch costs, and also how to make cucumber sandwiches. Hands, after all, are tools of diplomacy. They pass letters, hold gloves, lift monocles, press handkerchiefs to lips when shocked by someone's poor laden. They are not merely appendages, they are ambassadors. You tuck the buffing pad away, and slip your now glowing fingers into your gloves. The leather is tight, but you don't mind. Let them stretch. Let them learn the shape of perfection. You're ready to open doors, tip hats, and perhaps flick ash from a cigar with quiet grandeur. Your hands are no longer hands. They are instruments of Victorian civility. Gloves on, collar crisp, and nails buffed into understated excellence, you now approach the final, and most perilous part of the morning routine, the shave. You ease open the lacquered shaving box on your dresser, revealing a toolkit that could double as a surgical kit or a murder mystery prop. Inside, a gleaming straight razor, a small strop for sharpening, a badger hair brush fluffed to near divinity, and a shallow porcelain bowl of shaving soap so dense it might qualify as a mineral. You pick up the razor first. It's heavy, balanced, and elegant in that I could nick your jugular sort of way. Victorian shaving is not for the faint of heart. There's no safety razor, no plastic cartridge with lubricating strips. There's just you, a naked blade, and the quiet understanding that one sneeze could end it all. You reach for the shaving soap and begin to swirl the brush. The scent rises, lavender, eucalyptus, and quiet danger. As the lather thickens, you pause just a beat to mentally prepare. A man doesn't rush this. A man negotiates with his reflection. The lather goes on warm, thick, luxurious. You spread it across your cheeks and chin in small, circular motions. It's less about cleansing, more about ceremony. You've seen barbers do this with the flourish of a flamenco dancer. You are not a barber. You are cautious. You tilt your head, lift the razor, and begin. First stroke, down the cheek, with the grain. The blade whispers against the skin. No necks. You exhale. A good sign. But there's a long road ahead. Straight razors require precision and patience. No multitasking. No distractions. You can't sip tea while you shave. You can't hum. You certainly can't ponder the Crimean War. You are in the moment, connected by a thin, unforgiving strip of steel to your own mortality. Historians still argue whether Victorian men actually enjoyed shaving or merely endured it as a daily test of grit. There's evidence to support both. Some considered it a sacred rite of self-discipline, others hired valets or barbers to handle it entirely, usually while half asleep and swaddled in towels like a sleepy dupe. You manage the jawline with a deft flick, careful not to angle too steeply. The blade must glide. If it tugs, it bites. You know this. You've learned the hard way. There's a tiny scar on your chin from 1878, what you call the Easter incident. You were humming a hymn. Never again. Once the cheeks are smooth, you rinse the blade in warm water, admire the frothy residue, and move on to the neck, the final frontier. The hair grows in spirals here, as if to mock you. You hold your breath. One stroke, two, and there. Dawn. A faint sting remains, but the skin feels like marble. You reach for the alum block and rub it along the freshly shaven skin. It burns like salted fire. Your eyes water slightly, but you blink through it. Pain is part of the charm. Then comes the aftershave, not a gentle lotion, but a bracing splash of bay rum or witch hazel, guaranteed to either close your pores or startle you into consciousness. You slap it on with the enthusiasm of someone who's already accepted his fate. The burn is immediate. You feel alive. You also feel like your face has been lightly torched, but in the best way. Shaving in the Victorian era wasn't just hygiene. It was an assertion of control in a world of fog, industrial soot, and unpredictable medical leeches. It said, I may not control Parliament, but I control my jawline. Quirky alternatives did exist. Safety razors began to emerge in the latter part of the century, marketed toward those who valued convenience over valor. Some even used depilatory creams, charmingly labeled powdered hair death, which dissolved hair and possibly your sense of smell. But for most men, real men, as the newspapers implied, shaving remained a blade-based ballet. Every morning, a quiet duel with oneself. You rinse your face with cool water, pat dry, and admire your reflection. The skin is flushed, polished, just slightly trembling with victory. You've emerged unscathed, or at least with nothing that can be covered by a high collar. You close the razor case, slide it back into its drawer, and whisper a brief thanks to the gods of hand-eye coordination. One wrong move, and this day could have ended with a monogram tourniquet. But not today. Today, you are victorious. And smooth. So smooth you might just be mistaken for a diplomat or a villain. Either way, you look sharp. You survived the razor. Your skin glows with that just barely bleeding freshness. You smell like bay rum and triumph. But the day hasn't truly begun until you've paid a visit to the chamber potent, of course, applied a generous dab of eau de rue to compensate. You retreat to the corner of your bedroom, where a mahogany commode cabinet discreetly houses your porcelain throne. It's decorated with inlaid marquetry, as if that somehow dignifies the act. You open the doors and behold the pot itself, pristine, floral patterned, ominously still. Victorian. Toilets were a journey, not a convenience. In your home, if you're among the fortunate few with indoor plumbing, the water closet may be located on a separate floor, possibly requiring a butler, a boot boy, and a detailed strategy map to reach in time. For expediency, especially at night, you use the chamber pot. You sit. You reflect. You try not to make eye contact with the portrait of your grandfather hanging above the cabinet. He disapproves of many things. This is probably one of them. The chamber pot is efficient, but not glamorous. Once you're finished, etiquette dictates that you cover it with a cloth lid or quickly carry it to be emptied, usually by your long-suffering valet, who now has an entire personality disorder centered around his relationship with your digestive routine. You reach for the small bottle of eau de rue, a pungent herbal cologne made with rue, vinegar, and occasionally crushed mint leaves or rosemary. Its main purpose: smell warfare. It doesn't smell good so much as it smells loud, stomping out the ambient unpleasantness of 19th century plumbing with brute herbal force. You dab it on the inside of your wrists and under your nose. It burns a little, which lets you know it's working. The scent. Imagine if a salad was furious with you. Sharp, herbal, with undertones of please do not approach. This is your olfactory armor, and you'll need it. The air in Victorian London is not forgiving. Even stepping outside exposes you to horse droppings, coal smoke, and fishmongers yelling enthusiastically at 7 a.m. Eau de rue was your first offense. Of course, others had their own methods. Some carried vinaigre destiny silver boxes filled with a vinegar-soaked sponge. You lift the lid, hold it discreetly near your nose, and inhale like a scandalized dowager. It helps. A bit. Historians still argue whether these early attempts at odor control were sincere efforts or simply part of a grand performance of decorum. After all, masking bodily functions with floral vinegar is a uniquely Victorian brand of optimism. And what of the disposal process? If you're not on the ground floor, the chamber pot must be emptied into a slop bucket, and then brace yourself off and tossed out the window. Ideally with a shouted warning of garde à l'eau, French for watch out for the water. The phrase became such a part of daily life that some historians believe it's the origin of the word loo. You, being a man of refinement, have instructed your staff to never throw things out of windows. Not anymore, after that unfortunate incident involving the vicar. Still, the chamber pot is part of your routine. You clean it fastidiously, or rather, your valet does. You keep it perfumed. Some even have built-in lids with music boxes to mask unpleasant noises. Yours does not. You're not made of money. And as for public toilets, good luck. You once visited a gentleman's club where the urinals were porcelain troughs surrounded by decorative palms. Privacy. Optional. Fragrance. Regrettable. So here you are, delicately balancing a blend of lemon-scented shame and herbal denial, standing in your room like a man who has made peace with the reality of indoor plumbing. Or the lack thereof. You step away from the cabinet, straighten your waistcoat, and glance once more in the mirror. No one would ever guess where you've been. That's the art of Victorian life, looking immaculate, regardless of what just happened behind a walnut veneer. You dab a little more eau de rue behind your ears. Just in case. Because today, you might pass a duchess on the stairs. And she must never know. The essentials are behind you, your mustache stands proud, your face is razor smooth, and your chamber pot, mercifully, has been dealt with. But you're not ready to venture out just yet. Not until you've partaken in that most decadent, damp, and faintly public of rituals, the Victorian gentleman's bath. You descend to the bathing chamber. Or rather, what you generously call the bathing chamber. It's a drafty room lined with cracked tiles, hosting a single enamel-coated tub perched like an ancient relic on 4 clawed feet. You've lit the fire hours ago. Still, the room carries a chill that seeps into the bones and questions your choices. The tub contains approximately 2.5 inches of tepid water, the standard. Heating a full bath is not only impractical, it's borderline scandalous. There's the cost of coal, the effort of servants hauling buckets, and of course the Victorian concern that too much hot water might sap your vital energies. You remove your robe with theatrical dignity and lower yourself in. The water is lukewarm, approaching cool. Your calves shriek. Your back stiffens. and then surrender. You are submerged, though barely, in what can only be described as warm pessimism. Your valet hovers nearby not for indecency, but because this is a team sport. He ladles water from a basin and pours it gently over your shoulders. You nod in appreciation, staring off into the middle distance like a soldier at Waterloo. Victorian baths were not daily. Twice a week, if you're a fastidious fellow. Once a week, if you're typical. More often, people start asking questions. Baths were reserved for resetting the soul, not casual rinsing. And always with some kind of fragrant additive. Today, you've opted for lavender vinegar, a sharp, biting concoction of crushed lavender buds soaked in white vinegar and left to ferment under the judgmental gaze of the pantry maid. It smells surprisingly pleasant when diluted. You hope. Your valet pours a capful into the water. The surface clouds like a potion. You swirl it gently, noting the faint purple tinge and the lingering acidic tang. Supposedly, this mixture soothes the nerves, restores the spirit, and repels lice. Historians still argue whether it did any of those things. But it definitely repels people if used too liberally. You begin your ablutions. First the face cupping. Water, dabbing politely. Then the arms, the chest, and finally, your feet, which you scrub using a coarse cloth and what feels like the ghost of sandpaper. Soap comes next, a hard, lemon-scented bar you've kept on a string, partly to hang it dry and partly to avoid losing it in the murky bathwater. Quirky as it sounds, shared water wasn't uncommon. In family homes, multiple members might use the same tub sequentially, oldest to youngest. You, thank heavens, bathe alone. Still, the water by this point is conversational. You reach for your loofah. It's dried gourd flesh, stiff and mean, like something you'd use to sand furniture. You scrub your shoulders with grim resolve, wondering why elegance must sting so much. Once cleaner, at least vinegar marinated, you lean back and stare at the ceiling. Some men use this time for meditation. Others, for reading. You've brought a small book of sonnets, wrapped in wax paper to prevent splash damage. You read the opening lines and promptly forget them. The bath is too cold. Your skin has gone from pink to slightly blue. Time to end this luxury. Your valet approaches with a hot cloth, a final touch. He wrings it out and presses it gently to the back of your neck. You sigh, eyes fluttering closed. For one brief moment, you feel like royalty. Damp, prunny-fingered royalty. You rise from the tub like a war hero from the trenches. Water drips. Your knees crack. You are handed a bath sheet, a generous term for something only slightly larger than a napkin. You dab yourself dry, starting with the important bits and working outward. You step onto the rug, cold tiles a distant memory, and feel strangely accomplished. The Victorian bath may not be spa-like, but it carries a theatrical dignity. You endured. You emerged. You're cleaner, at least vinegar-flavored. And that, really, is the best one can hope for. Refreshed, toweled, and somehow colder than before, you return to your dressing room where your valet hands you the final flourish of any respectable Victorian morning, a tiny glass of brandy. No, not for drinking though, let's be honest. That's plan. This one's for your mouth. Because before toothpaste became minty fresh and fluoride laced, many gentlemen preferred their oral rinse to sting, burn, and gently pickle the tonsils. You toss the brandy into your mouth like a cowboy at a saloon, swish it once, and hold. The effect is immediate. A rush of fire along the gums, a tingling under your tongue, and the subtle whisper of your ancestors saying, "Why are we doing this again?" Victorian mouthwash had one primary goal: kill everything. Germs, breath, doubt, possibly memories. Brandy worked perfectly well, strong enough to disinfect, elegant enough to justify as medicinal, and socially acceptable because, well, everyone was slightly tipsy before 11. You swish a moment longer. Your eyes water. Your left ear pops. Then, with quiet dignity, you lean over the basin and spit. Brandy wasn't the only player in the Victorian oral hygiene game. There were mixtures called elixirs, tonics, and drops often containing peppermint oil, borax, or camphor. Some recipes even included hydrogen peroxide in early forms. Others, raw egg whites and myrrh. Historians still argue whether these did more harm than good. One famous tonic, Dr. Thistlethwaite's mucosal clarifier, claimed to blanch the gums, polish the teeth, and restore the sparkle of youth. It also turned one dentist's chair lavender. Still, for many men, alcohol-based rinses were king. Why? Because alcohol was widely believed to draw out the humors. You weren't just freshening your breath, you were balancing your spiritual fluids. You dab your lips with a monogrammed cloth and examine your reflection. Your breath now carries the faint suggestion of French oak barrels and very poor decisions. Quirkier still, some mouth rinses came in solid form. You'd chew a small chalky pellet called a mouth pastil, then rinse with water. Or don't rinse. Just chew and pray. One popular brand in 1854 used powdered alum and wisp venom. You don't ask why. You simply nod and decline. Of course, mouthwash also had social implications. A gentleman who gargled daily was thought to be considerate, cultured and charming. One who did not. At best, eccentric. At worst, dangerous. You recall that unfortunate cousin who refused to rinse. He was quietly disinvited from every poetry salon west of Kensington. There were also mouth rinse rituals. Some gentlemen gargled while reciting sonnet Shakespeare was a favorite. Others paced. One baronet swore that standing on one leg enhanced the effect. He tried it once. Nearly died. You reach for your toothpick, carved from sandalwood and resting in a silver case shaped like a clarinet. It's mostly for show, but today you make use of it, plucking delicately at some imaginary remnant of breakfast. All part of the illusion. In high society, toothpicks were wielded like conversational punctuation. You could lean back in a chair, thoughtfully tapping your lips with one while offering unsolicited opinions on parliamentary reform. Stylish. Reassuring. Slightly absurd. And for truly luxurious breath control, clove lozenges. You pop one now, letting the sharp spice melt slowly on your tongue. It numbs your mouth slightly. You like that. It gives you something to focus on while ignoring the fact that your left sock has developed a personality of its own. Breath in the Victorian age was rarely pristine. Diets were heavy, ventilation was poor, and pipes were abundant. So men did what they cold rinsed, chewed, and masked. There was no breathalyzer. Just raised eyebrows. You swirl the last bit of brandy in the bottom of the glass. Some men swallowed it at this point. You are not some men. You pour it into the basin with the finality of a sermon. And just like that, your mouth is no longer a battlefield. It is a boudoir of intimidation, smelling of cloves, ethanol, and ambition. You smile. Just slightly. Your teeth, still vaguely gray, catch the light. Your valet returns with your hat. You nod. Your breath says approach with caution. Your demeanor says perhaps not. You're nearly out the door shaven, scented, pressed, and polished. But then, a small discomfort ripples up from below. A pinch. A whisper. A gentle, passive-aggressive reminder that your footwear is a trap and your socks are not as innocent as they look. You sit. Slowly. Deliberately. And reach for your salvation. Foot powder. Victorian footwear, though fashionable, was less about comfort and more about looking like you could march across an empire while harboring multiple corns. Your leather boots, freshly shined, are shaped less like feet and more like ceremonial canoes. And your socks. Wool. Dense. Warm. Itchy. Like walking inside an angry sheep. You remove one boot with a grunt, and unroll your sock. Already, there's redness. Moisture. A damp promise of blistered betrayal. You open a small tin of powdered talc. Mixed with peppermint and boric acid, a custom blend, made for you by a pharmacist who thinks he's a chemist. You tap some into your palm and dust it generously between your toes, across your heel, and into the sock itself. The feeling is immediate, dry, cool, and slightly like you're marinating. Victorian gentlemen took foot care seriously. Feet were a point of pride if only because walking was the main method of transportation. And poor foot hygiene could mean more than blisters. It meant social disgrace. You did not remove your boots in company unless you were absolutely sure they would not issue an odor warrant. Historians still argue whether the obsession with powdering feet was medical or purely performative. Either way, there was an entire industry built around it. Apothecaries sold foot deodorizers, sweat soakers, and odor remedies with alarming names like Dr. Pickering's Soul Purifier and the Gentleman's Insoluble Stench Balm. Some men added camphor crystals to their boot linings. Others carried tiny sachets filled with dried rosemary, lavender, and charcoal. You once tried a brand that promised soothing dryness for up to 3 days. It worked. It also bleached your toenails. You've since switched back to talc. There were even foot baths, miniature basins set by the fire in well-appointed homes, where gentlemen might soak their feet in vinegar, brandy, or hot mustard water while sipping sherry and reading the Times. You've done it once. Your feet tingled for hours. You weren't sure if it was therapy or revenge. You finish powdering one foot and move to the next, careful to lift and rotate it like a sacred artifact. You press a bit of powder into the toe of the boot itself, just for luck. Then slide your foot in. The boot resists. You insist. Eventually, the two reach a truce. And you stand. Better. Foot odor, of course, was the unspoken nemesis of the Victorian parlor. Everyone had it. No one acknowledged it. There were whispered rumors, men asked to leave dinner parties for offending the air. One baron reportedly had a footman stand near him at all times with a sachet of cloves, ready to wave it discreetly in emergencies. You check your laces tight, firm, but not cutting off circulation. You flex once, twice. The powder holds. The sock surrenders. You are back in control. Some gentlemen went further. They wore lion foot wraps under their socks, changed them midday, and kept a second pair of shoes for evening engagements. One notorious socialite rotated 4 pairs daily, claiming each had a different emotional temperature. You've considered it. But then again, you already carry a beard comb, cologne and vial, vinaigrette, and 3 monogrammed handkerchiefs. Your coat pockets are beginning to resemble a traveling curiosity shop. You brush your trousers down, straighten your spine, and look once more into the mirror. Your feet are ready. Silent. Scented. In prison, yes, but with dignity. You take a step. It feels like walking through a cloud of minty pride. And that, really, is the goal, to go forth into the world as if your feet don't exist at all. Because if no one's thinking about your feet, you're doing everything right. Your hands have been buffed, your nails polished, and your feet powdered to a near miraculous degree of dryness. But there remains one last touch to perfect the visage of the Victorian gentleman, the meticulous shaping of your eyebrows, and the occasional application of eye drops, a ritual of appearance and, if you're lucky, ocular relief. You lean in close to the looking glass, where the flickering gaslight dances across your features. Your eyebrows are bushy, yet respectable, not wild like a poet's, nor threadbare like a scholar's after all-night study sessions. They frame your face with the quiet authority of a well-curated hedge maze. The Victorian obsession with grooming didn't end at the beard. Brows were carefully trimmed and shaped, often using small scissors or the edge of a fine razor. Some men applied eyebrow pomade, a waxy mixture scented with lavender or almond oil to keep errant hairs obedient. You reach for a small pot of this curious balm, warming it between your fingers before smoothing it along the arches. It tames the hairs, giving them a slight sheen without any hint of theatricality. Your valet once remarked that well-groomed eyebrows were the silent sentinels of the face. You've never forgotten that phrase. Of course, some took eyebrow grooming further. Reports tell of certain dandified gentlemen who dyed their eyebrows to match their hair, or plucked strays for a cleaner line. Historians still debate whether these practices were widespread or confined to secret societies and stage actors. You brush your brows one last time with a tiny soft brush from your toiletry set. Then turn your attention to your eyes. Eyes in Victorian times were considered windows to the soul, or at least to one's hell. Eye strain was common among gentlemen, who read by gaslight or labored over ledger books. To soothe the tired eyes, many kept a small vial of collyrium or eye drops close at hand. You uncork a tiny bottle labeled rose water drops. A single drop lands delicately on your lower eyelid. It stings pleasantly, clearing away the haze of early morning exhaustion. You blink rapidly, feeling a slight coolness as the liquid spreads. Some eye drops were made with alum or borax, lending astringent qualities, while others contained belladonna or opium extracts, both fashionable, slightly dangerous, and borderline experimental. Historians still argue whether these remedies were therapeutic or simply an excuse to dangle a delicate bottle from one's fingers during polite conversation. Given the Victorian penchant for ornamentation, it's probably both. You replace the vial and stare once more into the mirror. Your eyes gleam, your brows are statuesque, and your face carries the unmistakable air of refined discomfort, a hallmark of a man who's just endured 8 steps of a complicated toilet. In truth, eyebrow pomade and eye drops were more than vanity. They were signals. You say, I care about appearances. You say, I endure minor pain for beauty. You say, I am a gentleman. You sit back, stretch your fingers, and consider the sheer complexity of your morning ritual. From soap made of tar to eyes bathed in rose water, the Victorian man's toilet is a parade of endurance, artifice, and subtle menace. Your grooming kit, a velvet-lined treasure chest of curiosities, awaits your next adventure. It holds secrets of refinement and whispers of sacrifice. Today, you are ready not just to face the world, but to charm, intimidate, and perhaps even inspire awe. Because every whisker, every polished nail, every dab of pomade is part of your armor. The Victorian gentleman's greatest weapon is not a sword, but the unwavering commitment to looking impeccable in spite of it all. The morning ritual nearly complete, you return your attention to the last and perhaps the most treasured possession of any Victorian gentleman who journeys far or simply wishes to be prepared for any social engagement, the traveling necessaire. You unzip the velvet-lined case, an object that weighs more than it looks and smells faintly of lavender and leather. Inside are rows of tiny compartments, each crammed with an arsenal of toiletries, grooming tools, and mysterious vials that suggest both adventure and mild obsession. There's your folding razor, sharp as a hawk's talon, balanced next to a miniature strop for maintenance in the field. Nearby, a small bottle of bay rum, a pourable version, nestles beside a silver-handled toothbrush, its bristles softer than those in your home set. This is the cavalry of hygiene, always ready. You lift a small jar of beard oil, the label worn but still legible, for majesty and might. A dab of this, you know, can restore your whiskers after long days on horseback or during interminable diplomatic talks. Nestled in velvet pockets are nail files, tweezers, and a pair of tiny scissors, so sharp they might be surgical instruments. Their presence alone reassures you that even the most unruly cuticle has no chance. A delicate eye drop bottle reminds you that soothing tired eyes is a luxury to carry, while a compact scent vial ensures you never smell less than formidable, no matter the latitude or longitude. Historians still argue whether these cases were practical travel companions or simply symbols of status, the sort of thing a gentleman might parrot before a club to quietly imply, I am prepared for anything, including scandal. Your necessaire also contains a small notebook for jotting down impressions or, perhaps, quick sketches of curious landscapes. Beside it, a tiny silver pen gleams with the promise of eloquence. Every item is secured meticulously, as if the fate of your day depends on not misplacing a single pin. And perhaps it does. Travel toiletry sets like this became popular as railroads and steamships shrank the world. A gentleman on the move was no less fastidious than one at home. Whether in a London hotel, a Parisian flat, or a remote colonial outpost, the ritual of care persisted. You close the case with a satisfying click and tuck it under your arm. Your reflection smiles back proud, prepared, and possibly slightly mad. Because after all this, you might just be. Your toiletries tell a story of dedication and defiance, a refusal to surrender to grime, odor, or disorder. They are the tools of survival in an age of soot, smog, and social expectation. And as you step out into the day, with your comb, your powder, your razor, and your poise, you carry more than possessions. You carry tradition. And, perhaps, a faint scent of bay rum. Now, take a deep breath. Feel the day's weight begin to soften, melting away like candle wax under a gentle flame. Imagine the quiet dignity of a Victorian morning, the clink of porcelain, the hiss of hot water, the comforting, if pungent, embrace of scented oils. Even as the world turns fast and noisy, remember the calm precision behind every small ritual. The slow, deliberate acts that remind us to care for ourselves. Even when life seems chaotic. Let the steady rhythm of grooming, of preparation, lull you into ease. Feel the calm settle in, like a soft shawl around your shoulders. In this moment, you are present. You are grounded. You are ready for whatever dreams may come, wrapped in the quiet strength of centuries past. Rest now. Tomorrow is another day to shine polished, poised, and impossibly refined.